Hey everybody, my name is Evan and I like to draw. And also, I think that dragons are awesome. So today, I decide that we're gonna cartoonify some of the most famous dragons, starting with Smaug here from The Hobbit. And a general rule of thumb I like to do when cartoonifying is to take the most prominent feature of the subject and then make the proportions a lot more drastic. So like Smaug, he kind of has these really big wings, so I gave him super tall wings. As you can see on my other drawings like the Baryonyx and the Spino, I emphasize their most drastic features. But once that outline is finished, I can go through and add some of the crisper lines throughout the entire drawing. And once that is all outlined, that is entirely half of Smaug finished, and what I can do to make the other half is just duplicate this, flip it over the y-axis, and connect it together. And that only leaves the little hole in his belly where we can fill in the tail. And once that's done, that is all of Smaug outlined, and then we can move on to the coloring. But right before we do that, I forgot to add a specific style I like to do, and that's to add little crosshatches that kind of act as shading on parts that overlap, like under the neck and along parts of the face. And then once those are added in, we can now move on to the coloring. And to start, I'll give all of the little wing flaps, or whatever you want to call them, in between the bony parts a nice orange that goes all the way through, and then once that is done, I can add the detail as well. And all of that detail will be a series of shading, which is pretty much just dark highlights around the edges and then lighter highlights towards the middle. And that kind of just gives it more of a realistic appearance. And just like the outline, all we have to do is duplicate that and put it on the other side, and then that's that finished, and we can move on to the next part of the coloring, which will be the head. Now Smaug's head is kind of two different colors with an orange towards the middle of the face and then black highlights towards the edge, so I can copy that exactly pretty much and put all the orange at the bottom, and then some of the lighter, darker horn highlights being a solid black-gray charcoal color all the way through. And his eyebrows and the two horns in the back get an ever so slightly darker color than the rest. Then we can move on to his belly color, which is just a tan all the way around with a few highlights and shadings towards the middle and light orange highlights on the neck, kind of to give it more of a 3D look as well, and like the regular Smaug has. And then next we can move on to his little feet, which will get a darker orange than all the other ones to kind of emphasize that they're in the background. And then the claws on the toes will get a gray, and this will be the same color I will use for the wing claws. And then next we can move on to coloring the eyes, which what I like to do for eyes when I cartoonify things, like you can see on this Baryonyx, I like to do a little solid color in the middle, and then a darker outline around the eye, and then a white highlight towards the middle and right at the pupil. It's kind of a nice style that I figured out a long while back, but for Smaug, he's kind of got orange eyes with darker orange towards the edge, so I can just do that exactly, and then I can give him a little yellow pupil this time, and then I can also add in the white highlights all around. And then the last thing to color will be the wings with the giant hands at the bottom, and these will get a dark gray with purple highlights all throughout. And then also for the little in-between bits, those will get a lighter gray to kind of show that they're like armory plates or whatever. And then the final thing to do will be to change all the black outlines to colors that match more so what they're on top of. So everything that's orange will get a dark orange instead of a black, and then everything that's gray will get a darker black, but it's also not black. And I can just go through the whole drawing and do this to every color. And once the last of those is colored in, the final thing to do is add some shading, which will be black at the bottom and a yellow gradient up towards the top, and this kind of just gives the drawing more definition and makes it look more pretty to look at. But once that's finished, that's Smaug entirely done, and we can move on to the next dragon. And the next will be whatever the heck this thing is. Honestly, I got no clue what it's from, but it looks weird and kind of spiky, and I was like, you know what, let's do it. And also, it reminds me a lot of a bird. Specifically, this guy, the Patoo bird, which I don't know what he is, but he looks goofy as ever. So I decided why not combine the two of these guys and make one of the most beautiful dragons you've ever seen. Oh yeah, he's so pretty. And much like Smaug, the coloring process is essentially exactly the same, where I'm just gonna take the most vibrant colors and put the basic shading in first, and then I'll go back and give it all the highlights and specialties. So the top of this Patoo dragon spiky thing's head will be a dark green, and that goes all the way throughout it. However, that green doesn't continue all the way down to the bottom jaw because on whatever the heck this thing is, there's like a weird little tan indent between the green on the bottom jaw, on the top jaw actually, so I put that there as well. But once that's all colored in the base color, I can then use a little bit of magic and we can add in all of the details, which would be some crosshairs and a little bit of light gray highlights and stuff around the rims of the eyes as well. And speaking of the eyes, we can give them yet another orange color, except this one is kind of more muted and less vibrant orange. And we can do that all the way throughout this absolutely giant eye. And instead of a darker orange around the ring, we can make it a green, because that's the same color as whatever the heck this thing is. And honestly, it does look pretty darn cool. Next up is going to be every single one of the horns on his head, and all of those will get a gradient starting from the top, which would be a off-white bone color, and then into a darker grayish green, and then to the darker green that blends in with the base color of the head. And then using a bit of magic once more, that is all of the little horns colored in, and then we can move on to the next part of this dragon, which is pretty much just the lower part. And all of the lower part will get filled in with a tan beige all the way throughout it. And then after that, I can give it a white, beige, lighter highlight. I don't know what color this is. It's basically just like the underbelly part of the dragon that goes all the way throughout, under the teeth, and then kind of, I don't know, makes this weird little spot in the middle, but it looks good once it's all colored in. And since the drawing process is exactly the same for this color as well, I'm just gonna skip to the part where I finish it. And here you can see I added in all of the crosshairs, the big ones in the back, and then a little bit of the shading all throughout it. But the other thing to do will be to color in the teeth, which is a little bit more different because Smaug only had two, but these ones are bigger and they're more, noticeable. So I can give them an off-white beige and then a dark gray highlight all throughout the top. And that's all the colors colored in, so it's the same process again as changing all the outlines to colors that more so match what they're on top of. And you've already seen this, so we can kind of just skip right through. However, I did forget to add the cross hatches to be the shading, so I can go through and add those in very quickly. And these also, just like Smaug, go on any of the overlapping parts to give them the shading, and it's also just a style I like to do. But once that's finished, the only thing left to do, again, is to add the shading and the lighting and all of that, which we can stare at this soulless, eyeless, scary-looking Patu bird dragon thing, and then we can just whisk it away, and there we go. That's all of the shading done on our magical Patu bird dragon, whatever the heck this thing is called, and then we can move on to the final one. And last but not least, we got King Ghidorah, the three-headed dragon hydra thing. And since he's a hydra, why not recreate the meme? I thought this was a pretty good idea, and the first thing we can do is just sketch in the two of the mean-looking hydras in the middle and the left side. But I made sure to make them look like the meme, but also look like Ghidorah, because, Ghidorah's got this weird kind of bony, pointy head. At least not the American Monsterverse version, but like the Japanese one and everything. It's got all of the pokey bits everywhere. And then once those two are added in, we can then go add in the final one, which is the derpy little guy all the way on the right side, with his giant tongue sticking out. And with the outline finished, the coloring for these guys is pretty simple because Ghidorah is pretty much just yellow all the way throughout. So we can do a base color of yellow and then go back over that one and add in some of the shading, which is just a darker yellow that's kind of orangey, and that will be some of the highlights and such, and then we can just keep going through and adding all the colors, and like the darker to the lighter highlights, to then eventually we get to the eyes, which is the only thing that's different because they're this massive, dark, piercing red, in the same style as all the other eyes, and then the teeth also look similar to the Patu bird dragon thing. And then after adding in some of the cross hatches in the background, that's pretty much the coloring for Ghidorah finish, and we can go through and do it for the one on the right side, and then the one on the left side as well. Now the two heads in the middle and the left side, I thought it would be funny if they are given the most detail, like the shading and the cross hatches and the little in-between cross hatches for the shading, which I guess is kind of the same thing, but, just because these are the ones that are supposed to look more intimidating and scary. And then for the guy on the right side, I thought it'd be funny if he had very minimal shading and kind of just looked like a derpy little guy. And then since the coloring was relatively simple, the only thing left to do is yet again change the outlines to colors to match what they're on top of, so the tongue will get kind of a dark gray pink-ish, I don't know what you call it. And then the eyes will get a much darker red all the way throughout them as well. And then the main color to change would be all the yellows and oranges, which just get a darker grayish yellow-orange all the way throughout them. And once that's finished, the only thing left to do is add in the shading once more, and that's us completely done here with all 3 dragons and onto the gallery. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. I kinda had this stupid little idea to just try and cartoonify things that I don't normally draw, but you know, it was pretty fun and I think they all turned out great. Anyway, thanks for sticking out till the end guys, and I'll see you later.